When officers Stephen and Joshua get tasked to investigate a light coming from the abandoned hospital, they are understandably hesitant, and in hindsight, maybe they should have rejected the job altogether, because what they encountered inside would shock both of them so much, they retired from active duty the very next day. Nobody should ever go into that hospital again. Stephen's hands were shocking so much he nearly dropped his flashlight. He was alone as he had lost track of Joshua a while ago. They should have never split up. How could they have been so stupid? He was standing in front of the hospital room from which the light had come. Stephen had considered just turning back and leaving many times by now, but he could not leave Joshua behind. But what did Stephen find behind inside the room? What could have caused the strange light, and what had happened to his colleague Joshua? Before we start our story, smash the like button. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. 2 hours before discovery. It was supposed to be just a regular early night of patrolling around the city for Stephen and Joshua, the same route they did multiple times a week. It was a so-called sleeper route, as nothing ever happened here, at least not until tonight. A lot of the route led through industry terrain and old parts of the city where less and less people were living as the years passed. The most notable building on the route was an old hospital that had been abandoned for at least 6 years after going bankrupt. Stephen and Joshua had already driven past it twice that evening as they were nearing the end of their shift. They were barely paying any attention anymore, but then Stephen managed to spot something out of the corner of his eye, and he immediately ordered Joshua to stop the car. From one of the windows of the supposedly abandoned hospital seemed to be coming a strange light. It was somewhat faint, but now that the night has started to fall, it was unmistakable. Neither of the officers had seen this before, so they called the station to report it. They were told that nothing or nobody was supposed to be in the hospital and that they had to go and check it out. But just the two of them, as they had no backup available right now. Part as Stephen already felt regret for reporting this. The hospital was enormous and neither of them had any idea of how to navigate it. Plus, by the time they made their way inside, it would probably be pitch black dark. But they had gotten the assignment now, so they had no choice. But man, would they come to regret this? Joshua parked the car, and then the pair started scaling the fence. They had no key to open it up, so this was the only way. The climb was a lot more difficult than they expected. This place was locked up well, and so were all the hospital entrances. 1.5 hours before discovery. The only way that Stephen and Joshua could think of was to use the energy staircase and then climb through the broken windows. The pair wondered that if anybody was actually in here, what entrance they could have possibly taken. They first wanted to stick together on their search, but quickly found out that this would probably be the whole night, and Joshua was not willing to do this. So against Stephen's better judgment, they split up so that they could cover more ground. They would stay in contact through their walkie-talkies, and this went well for the first hour. They managed to clear the first couple wings of the hospital and didn't find any sign of anybody having been here in years. But then things suddenly changed. 30 minutes before discovery. When Stephen tried to reach Joshua for an update, all he could hear was static. Until after a little bit, this also suddenly stopped. Immediately after this moment, something happened that made Stephen's hair stand up on the back of his neck. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the empty halls of the hospital. There was no doubt in Stephen's mind that it came from Joshua. Something had happened. Something bad. He started calling out for Joshua but got no response, only dead silence. Stephen quickly retreated back into a room and closed the door. He made a call back to the station to tell them what had happened. They would send reinforcements to him as quickly as possible, but as the hospital was relatively far from the station, it would take at least half an hour before they would arrive. That was way too long for Stephen. Who knows what could happen to his partner in that half hour? He could not just hide out here and wait. Every second wasted was a second too much in his mind. So Stephen took a deep breath and made his way into the hallway again. 20 minutes before discovery, he roughly had an idea where Joshua had to have been when the contact was broken and he heard the scream. With his weapon locked and loaded, he made his way to the staircase and went up a couple flights to get to the level Joshua was supposed to be at. On his way, he saw a lot of boot prints on the open door. This had to have been Joshua's doing. He was always fairly heavy-handed when doing these kinds of operations. Stephen was on the right track, and it wasn't long before he found something. When he came to the reception area of the wing, he could immediately see that there had been a struggle here, and fairly recent, as lots of thighs were knocked over, revealing dustless spots of the desk or the ground. And then he found the final proof. On the ground was Joshua's walkie-talkie smashed to pieces. Stephen could still recognize the police logo on a couple of the pieces. Joshua was in danger, but there was also something that gave Stephen a bit of hope for things to end up all right. He had quickly checked around the area of the supposed struggle and had not found Joshua anywhere. That meant that whoever or whatever he had encountered had either taken him or Joshua himself was chasing his assailant. But now Joshua was somewhat stuck, as he had no idea what direction Joshua had gone or was taken. Stephen had no leads, either except for one. He vaguely remembered where the light had come from that made them initially. Besides, the reception was actually a layout of the hospital. Stephen quickly went over it and found that the light had most likely come from somewhere in the intensive care department. It was not too far away from where he was now, and he had no idea where else to look. As Stephen made his way to the intensive care unit, he noticed no signs of struggle or dragging in the hallways. Could Joshua have gone willingly with his assailant, or was something else at play? The hospital was difficult to navigate, but Stephen eventually reached the intensive care department. Signs of prior habitation were evident. Seats arranged in circles and old red markings on the walls in a language he couldn't understand. Stephen touched the dried markings, relieved they weren't fresh, but the eerie atmosphere unsettled him. Calling out for anyone yielded no response. Desperate to find clues, Stephen began checking rooms, all of which were abandoned and dark. Evidence suggested people had been sleeping there recently, but there was no sign of activity now. At the end of the hallway, Stephen spotted a faint light beneath a door. Quietly approaching, he found it locked. Undeterred, he forcefully kicked it open. A flickering light greeted him, and as his eyes adjusted, he took in the shocking scene. The room was filled with lit candles and the same red markings on the walls, but the large pentagram painted on the floor left no doubt. Stephen realized the truth. This was the lair of devil worshippers. Stephen could barely imagine what the cult could have done to Joshua. Stories of devil-worshipping groups in the city had circulated for months, with pentagrams and sacrifices reported. Now Stephen had the proof. As he processed the scene, a loud thud came from a locker in the corner. Stephen, cautious but determined, smashed the lock open with his baton. Inside, he found Joshua tied up, gagged, and visibly shaken. After freeing him, Joshua explained that 4 cult members had ambushed him at the reception. Realizing resistance was futile, he had cooperated and been brought to the room. Stephen and Joshua quickly prepared to leave, but just as they were collecting evidence, they heard movement and a low humming from the hallway. A group of cult members in red robes appeared holding candles. The two froze momentarily before fleeing as the cult gave chase. They dashed down several floors, finally finding an open exit door. Outside, they scaled a fence and reached their car. Within 15 minutes, police swarmed the scene, arresting the cult members before they could escape. The quick response ensured no further harm. The ordeal profoundly affected Stephen and Joshua, leading both to retire from active duty the next day. The hospital, now heavily guarded, had its remnants of devil worship scrubbed clean, restoring peace to the city. And that concludes this chilling and unforgettable tale of courage and survival. What would you have done if you were in Stephen's shoes? Could you have faced such danger head-on, or would you have taken a different path? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Your feedback and reactions mean the world to us. They inspire us to continue bringing you incredible stories like this one. So, take a moment to share your insights, theories, or even your own experiences related to this story. Don't forget to hit the like button if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, and share it with friends who love thrilling tales like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of suspense, mystery, and excitement. Thank you for being a part of our community. Stay curious, stay bold, and we'll see you in the next story.